This video of The Completionist is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Did you guys know that ExpressVPN is one of the best services out there to protect you while you are browsing on the internet? Personally, I use ExpressVPN in a couple of different ways, but the one that I use it for mostly is for the streaming wars. The streaming wars essentially are this thing that's happening right now where we're getting so many different streaming services and platforms for all different kinds of things. I do a lot of travel. I travel internationally all the time. And so for me, I get different access to different things based on what part of the world that you're in. With ExpressVPN, regardless of what service you use, you will have the ability to use the VPN services through other regions, so you can get stuff that's not available in the US and vice versa. And ExpressVPN is pretty dang cheap. And if you sign up today at expressvpn.com/complete, you can find out today how you can get your first 3 months for free. ExpressVPN is one of the most high-tech and secure when it comes to privacy. Anytime you use any of its services through its apps or different programs, you get full privacy 100%. Not even ExpressVPN knows what you're doing. That's really, really safe. And at the end of the day, they have 24/7 customer service. So if you have any issues, any concerns, they got your back all the time. Again, sign up today at expressvpn.com/complete. Thank you guys for watching and enjoy today's video. By now, Sonic the Hedgehog has run millions of miles and collected nearly an endless number of rings throughout the course of his franchise's history, which means that every new Sonic game faces the challenge of standing apart from the pack while also delivering on the fast-paced action that the fans of the series have come to expect. And while swords are a staple of video games, giving one to Sonic and sending him to medieval times seems like one of those ideas that could really go either way. This is one of those Sonic games that slip between the cracks, but will always be remembered as the one where Sonic has a sword. So while that one sentence description sounds both great and terrible, it turns out to mostly be the latter. We'll explore why this adventure deserves to be a lost footnote in Sonic's history when I complete Sonic and the Black Knight.
Here comes a new challenger! Yes! Danger!
Hey everyone, and welcome back to an all-new episode of The Completionist, where we don't just beat the games, we complete them. Today, we're taking a look at yet another Sonic game, and this one's not exactly a masterpiece per se. Sonic is a huge series with tons of games, and obviously they're not all gonna be great. And Sega even started taking some of those poorly received games off of shelves in the hopes that people would forget about them, and only remember hopefully the classics. But forgetting about things isn't something we do here at The Completionist. And when I remembered that there's a Sonic game where he in fact has a sword and that I've never played it somehow, I knew I had to give it a shot today. I mean, look, I love swords. I have like 30 of them lying around this office alone. There's always just one sword lying somewhere off a camera. See? But just because the hack and slash lifestyle works for me, that doesn't mean it'll work for Sonic. He's a hedgehog, and I'm a man. We have different needs. I have a problem, but a fun problem. Sonic and the Black Knight was released at a weird time for the Sonic franchise, and you can definitely feel it. Everything about the game has a sure, why not vibe to it that it almost feels like this game is a little embarrassed by its own existence. A direct sequel to 2007's Sonic and the Secret Rings, the two games make up the short-lived Sonic storybook series, where Sonic got to barge into classic stories like Arabian Nights, The Legends of King Arthur, and, well, that's it, I guess. It's not too much of a surprise that this sub-series was abandoned because Sonic and the Black Knight came at a time in the series where there was a whole lot of throwing stuff at the wall just to see what sticks. It came at the tail end of a pretty much rough run for the 3D Sonic games, where it felt like the series had possibly lost its way. And while Sonic Colors would come out and turn things around a short time later, it's not too surprising that Sega wants to sweep this whole era of Sonic games under the rug. See, Black Knight and Secret Rings stand out a bit from the pack though, just by virtue of their weird relationship to classic literature. Yet Sonic and the Black Knight killed the entire Sonic storybook subseries and left it as this weird anomaly that only runs across two games. In this second and final installment of that abandoned series, our speedy blue friend finds himself in this strange new world where he's summoned by Merlin's granddaughter, whose name is, and I am not joking, Merlina. Yeah, why not? Anyways, Merlina summons Sonic to be her champion against the Black Knight, who is actually a corrupted version of King Arthur, and in order to take him on, Sonic has to team up with a talking sword named Caliburn. Yeah, why not? So there are some twists and turns later on that reveal who the true villain is, but this setting is mostly an excuse to check in with this world's versions of Sonic's pals, like Shadow, Knuckles, and Blaze, who fill in the roles of Lancelot, Gawain, and Percival, respectively. And while the storyline is standard Sonic fare with a medieval paint job, the same cannot be said for the gameplay. Oh wait, yes it can. Sorry about that. Sonic is gonna run forward with a series of obstacles, enemies, and collectibles in his path. The only real difference here is Caliburn, who can be used to attack by flicking the Wiimote. You know, like a sword. Sonic has to run, jump, and slice his way through a series of missions, earning 5-star ratings on each level, and gaining followers by being so cool that the medieval townsfolk have no choice but to join his cause. Essentially, the story and the gameplay can both be summed up with the sentence, Sonic has a sword now. So maybe I should have just said that. But yeah, Sonic has a sword now, and it's not as cool as it sounds. So sometimes, two awesome things are awesome individually, but when you try to throw them together, they don't do each other any favors, like putting ice cream on pizza, or some of the truly weird guest characters that fighting games have had, or sadly, handing Sonic a sword and sending him into the Middle Ages. All the words in that sentence are dope individually, but when you put them together, they somehow only detract from each other, just like in this game. Part of that blame can be laid at the feet of Sonic and the Secret Rings, which this game definitely feels like a direct sequel to, for better and for worse. Alright, mostly for worse. The music in this game is a huge improvement, and actually pretty rad, but a lot of what made Secret Rings underwhelming got carried over to this one. The control scheme is still whack as all hell, and while there are games that were great at implementing the Wiimote into their gameplay, this is yet again not one of them. If it was used solely for swordplay, or if there was a way to use the GameCube controllers for a more classic control scheme, it wouldn't be a problem, but it all ends up feeling super imprecise. And that imprecision is a big deal when part of completion is getting 5 stars on every level. You need to be able to trust that the controls won't screw you over. The game, and by extension Sonic himself, moves very quickly, which is necessary for a Sonic game. But implementing swordplay into that dynamic would require some real fine-tuning and consideration that this game lacks. The sword doesn't make gameplay feel much different from other Sonic games of this era, and you can see why they ended up sticking with the Wisp system from Sonic Colors. The Wisps are way more versatile and fit better with Sonic's style of dealing with enemies. It's one of many instances where the medieval theming gets in the way. Instead of more creative weaponry, we get rote swordplay, and it can't be dope and interesting swordplay because it's still a Sonic game, which means you're in constant motion. They just don't mix. But with that said, I did appreciate the moments in this game where I got to play as other characters like Knuckles, who uses a pair of dope-ass swords that double as boomerangs and feel pretty different from Sonic. Playing as a wider variety of Sonic's pals is something I've missed in the more recent games, and I was happy to see it here. Although, while a lot of those Sonic buddies pop up in multiplayer, the story doesn't go nearly as far as it could or should have with integrating those characters into the medieval setting. It's like Sega thought that throwing Sonic and a couple of his pals back in time was enough, instead of working to give us the dopest possible version of that. When Knuckles, Shadow, and Blaze show up as medieval versions of themselves, it's pretty cool, especially because a lot of the game's cutscenes have a very neat, hand-drawn vibe. But why not go all the way and give a bigger world with a wider variety of those characters? There are no shortage of Sonic characters, and also no shortage of characters in Arthurian legend. So commit to the premise of the game and map all of the classic Sonic stuff into this strange new world instead of just a couple of things, especially given that a bunch of those redesigns already exist in the game for the multiplayer mode. Go even further, what kind of weird stuff is the medieval version of Dr. Eggman up to? We'll never know, because instead, we get a generic Black Knight and an equally generic wizard, and those are basically all of the characters unless you count the talking sword. This weird paper-thin commitment to the setting applies most strongly to the world though. A huge chunk of the game is about gaining followers, like some kind of time-traveling social media influencer. What this ends up entailing is impressing the medieval villagers as you race through their property. You'd think that would mean the villagers would have some personality, but nope, generic-ass villagers. You even have to stop to do quests for the villagers, which basically just entails doing little quick-time events, and those things stop the mission cold. In a game all about speed, it feels weird to just straight up stop so you can chat with a blank-faced peasant. It just feels super bare bones, like the inherent weirdness of Sonic in the Middle Ages justifies ignoring all of the details, with multiple missions at each, and revisiting those missions over and over to get a higher ranking would be fine if they weren't also super generic. Lots of fields, a castle or two, and I know that some of Sonic's most famous levels are basically just fields and buildings, but there's no personality to them here beyond, hey, look, it's a castle. It just feels like they couldn't get past the most basic medieval iconography. So those medieval tropes end up feeling boring compared to other Sonic locations. And with that, Sonic's moves feel boring because they don't link or relate to the new surroundings. And speaking of boring, the mechanics are super dull too, with Sonic essentially just auto-running through an area while you occasionally attack an enemy with a talking sword. Even the more challenging stuff, like getting a 5-star rating or gaining followers, had weird moments that made me go, really? Like, I couldn't even get 5 stars on the tutorial level until I ranked up Sonic. And that seems nuts to me. Making me revisit levels is one thing, but making me revisit them for no reason even though I did everything right the first time is another. The game does the same thing with followers too. I had to get all the followers on each level, and some levels have over hundreds of followers you can gain, but the game caps it at 30 per run for no real reason. It's just to pad things out and to make you revisit levels, but it just feels like I'm being punished even though I did nothing wrong. And again, the whole concept of the followers feels like the developers got hamstrung by their game's premise. What do we have in the Middle Ages? Treasure and villagers. Quick, build the game around those things, whether it feels like Sonic or not. With more variety, gaining followers or finding treasure for the purpose of completion wouldn't be so boring. There are over 200 unique items to collect and to fill your treasury with, and they can be obtained by either doing those tasks for the villagers or finding them in chests. But then you have to ID them at the end of the level with ID points, and it just feels like another meaningless barrier to collect and ID them all, forcing you back into the game's levels with no meaningful change to the gameplay. Exploring castles and collecting stuff is a tried and true video game format, and integrating it into a Sonic game shouldn't make it feel boring and frustrating. Collecting all that stuff feels like busy work. And when you're working to unlock things like music or art or cutscenes, at least you feel like you're being rewarded for your troubles. But even with all of that meaningless homework to do, the game is extremely goddamn short, which means there was plenty of space for more meaningful locations, characters, and gameplay. But including the cutscenes, it's only a few hours, and it ends up highlighting how much this game just feels like it's missing stuff. The general premise is cool and weird. There's all sorts of potential in the setting, but Sonic and the Black Knight coasts on those things instead of using them as a launch pad into cool moments and design choices. Even the inclusion of more swords probably wouldn't have helped. In keeping with its half-assed approach to being both a Sonic game and an homage to King Arthur, there's not much here that's rewarding, in the literal or figurative sense. The only big rewards here are in the game's gallery mode. Artwork, some cutscenes, and character profiles, with a few pieces of music, which you'll unlock as you 5-star the levels. Oh, and the characters for the multiplayer mode, but you'll unlock them as soon as you see them through the story. That's it though. There's no real reward for collecting all 200 and something items, except that some of the items can be equipped as weapons or bonuses to help you out. That's neat and all, but there are still so many of them that even finding a super rare item just feels sort of random and unmotivated, like less of a reward and more of a coincidence. All in all, once you've played through the incredibly short story, there's no real motivation to keep going back for completion. And yeah, sure, completion is its own reward sometimes, but actual rewards are nice too. Each level has to be replayed so many times to get all the items, earn all the followers, and achieve all the 5-star ratings, but those levels had a hard time holding my attention the first time around, and certainly couldn't on a repeat visit. Look, overall, Sonic and the Black Knight didn't take very long to complete, but it felt like it took a lot longer than it actually did, given how early in the process I felt like I'd seen and done everything there was to do and see. After that, I was just checking items off of a list and no longer getting any real joy from the cool cutscenes or from the novelty of Sonic using a sword to slice up bad guys. I don't know if I've ever felt this burned out by a completion process this short, but fortunately it was over quickly, so the sting didn't linger and I could return to playing other better Sonic games. It's easy to see why Sega felt that this wasn't one of Sonic's games games that best reflected the series. And as a huge Sonic fan, I think it was worth the couple of hours it took to play through the main story. But there's no reason here to keep returning to this game when there are so many good Sonic adventures that came out both before and after this. While I completed Sonic and the Black Knight, there were 18 deaths because the Middle Ages were dangerous, man. 242 items collected, only some of which actually do anything at all. 150 followers impressed per level. 17 hours of total playtime, most of which was spent replaying levels in the hopes of getting randomly generated items. Fun. And a total of 2 entries in the Sonic Storybook series, which is really too bad because I have it on good authority that the next one was going to be Sonic Pride and Prejudice.
So there you guys go. Just like Sonic in this game, Sonic and the Black Knight has been lost in the annals of time, and I definitely see why. It's really short, unfortunately lazily put together, and it doesn't take advantage of its awesome premise. I guess the only thing it has going for it is the fact that the sword talks. But since my sword can't talk, I paid Ted $20 to do a good voice. Isn't that right, Ted Sword?
It sure is, Gerard.
All right, Ted, that voice was not so good. That was like a Crush 40 kind of Sonic voice. This is a good sword. Give me a strong voice.
It sure is, Gerard.
Yeah, we'll go with that. So, with that in mind, guys, we give this game our completionist rating of Look at it.
Look at it.
That's all the time we have today, guys, so please, as always, let us know what you thought about today's episode somewhere on the internet. Don't forget a big thank you to our sponsor, ExpressVPN. If you want to sign up, head over to expressvpn.com/complete. I've been Gerard the Completionist. That's been Ted My Sword, and we'll see you next week from the brand new episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You gotta work on your
Bye.
Have you done an improv class?
See you guys.
Do you know the choices? Or do you want to...
Next time on Completion
Okay.
Zone.
Okay.